We're in section 6.2 and we're talking about microbial growth. And here it's talking about the temperature requirements for bacterial growth or microbial growth in general. And one of the things I want you to notice with some of the topics we're talking about with microbial growth is you think about like the narrow range of environmental conditions that humans live in. And it really is different when you're talking about microorganisms. They tend to be able to survive or function in very diverse environments. So that's one of the things I want you to kind of be noticing as we're talking about microbial growth in general, that microorganisms really have been able to live in any place, every place on this planet, no matter what the environmental conditions are. So temperature kind of illustrates that pretty well. So it says put microorganisms in four groups to describe the temperatures at which they grow and where they are found in nature. So if you look at this graph, it's showing you growth rate versus temperature. And just in case you're not that familiar with Celsius, 0 degrees Celsius is freezing. 100 degrees Celsius is boiling. Do you remember anybody know what human body temperature is? Human body temperature is 37 degrees Celsius. And just to give you some perspective, refrigerator temperature is usually around 4 degrees Celsius. So freezing is 0. Refrigerator is a little bit above that, about 4 degrees Celsius. And so room temperature can be, kind of around this zone right here, depending on, around the 20s. About is where most room temperature typically is. So what you're seeing here, actually, before I show you this graph, I just want you to notice that every organism has evolved to grow the fastest at a certain temperature. So the temperature at which they grow the fastest, we would call their optimum temperature. So for example, if I'm going to look at the group that I'm calling mesophiles, you can see they're growing their fastest in kind of the around human body temperature, somewhere around there, or in that range of room temperatures to body temperature, which is a little bit warmer usually. The minimum temperature is going to be the lowest temperature at which they grow, and the maximum temperature is going to be the maximum temperature at which they grow. And so what you'll notice, we have four general groups. The first group is called psychrophiles. Psychro means cold, phile means loving. So these are the organisms that love cold temperatures. And when we think about it, we actually use our refrigerator to inhibit the growth, to stop the growth of microorganisms. That's one of the big reasons why we use refrigerators to store our food. So the bacteria on our food, they would not be psychrophiles. We want to discourage the growth of them, and by putting it at low temperatures. So the psychrophiles are the bacteria that actually can survive in freezing temperatures or very cold temperatures, even though we think about life needing kind of to be warmer, but there are some that absolutely need it to be cold. And if you get warm at all, they can't grow. They can't grow at our typical room temperatures. So psychrophiles are cold-loving organisms. And I have a picture I'm going to show you on the next slide to give you some examples of these. Meso means middle. Phile means loving. So these are the organisms that love these moderate or middle temperatures. And if you look here, that's like I said, that's where our human body temperature is. So all those normal microbiota that live in and on our bodies, these are going to be mesophiles. Humans are mesophiles. Disease-causing microorganisms are going to be mesophiles because they grow at these temperatures. There's another group of organisms that has huge impact on our lives, and we don't necessarily think about them every day because it's part of our culture. But the organisms that decompose food, these are organisms that grow at moderate temperatures, at room temperature or in, normal environmental temperatures. So these are mesophiles, the ones that are growing in nature, the ones that are growing on decomposing food, spoiling food, causing foodborne illness. So remember, we said even we'll put these. We'll store our food in the refrigerator because when we get to refrigerator temperatures down here, these organisms don't grow or they don't grow very fast. So mesophiles. Most of the organisms you will ever come in contact in your life are going to be mesophiles. Thermophiles can grow at higher temperatures. They like heat. And if we look here again, go back to here, 100 degrees is boiling. Just to give you perspective, this around here, like 50, 60 degrees Celsius, I could actually put my hand in water that hot, but I would pull it out pretty fast. It's going to feel pretty hot to me. When you get up here over 60, it's just like, that's really hot. You don't want to stick your hand in that water. You can definitely scald yourself. But so these temperatures are quite high, but there are organisms that only grow at high temperatures and they can't grow at body temperatures. And then there's a last group of organisms called hyperthermophiles that grow at these extremely high temperatures, and some of them actually can even grow above boiling temperatures. So like I said, I'll show you some examples on the next page. But one thing I just want you to think about is what organisms are going to cause disease. And remember, if you're going to cause disease, you're going to be associated with the human body. So when you look at thermophiles, hyperthermophiles, and psychrophiles, they're very unlikely to be able to cause disease in humans or most of the life on this planet because they can't even grow at our body temperature. So here's some examples. Right here's a glacier. And you can see this red stuff on it. And this is a microscopic view of that red stuff. And these are photosynthetic prokaryotes that are, they're actually these red organisms that can grow on the surface of glaciers. And so these are psychrophiles. They have to be cold. You could not take a psychrophile and I don't know, transfer it in the laboratory. You couldn't grow it in the laboratory. Like, I couldn't go to this glacier, collect some of that, and bring it home. I'd have to find a way that I absolutely keep it cold in the transfer process because it has to be at that very low temperature. These would be psychrophiles. So these would be organisms that prefer growing at these very cold temperatures. So one of the things I always like to ask students, like which of these organisms could you actually find in Corning, New York? You're not going to find psychrophiles because we have moderate temperatures, and moderate temperatures would prevent the growth of this organism and probably kill it. So psychrophiles you're only going to find in places that stay cold year round. Mesophiles are doing things like this, decomposing food. So here I have some mold growing on bread. So mesophile mold would be a mesophile. Any bacteria that could grow on our food would be a mesophile, like those moderate temperatures. This picture is something that I see a lot driving to work. I think we talked about metabolism and how when bacteria metabolize their food, they release ATP, but they also release heat. And so here's that compost pile, and they're digging into it, and you see the steam coming out of it. And we can have, you can have a compost pile in your yard, even in the winter. If it's working really well, you can stick your hand way down in it and feel some heat. And that's because the organisms are metabolizing the food in that compost and generating heat as part of the byproduct of metabolism. If you have a well-running compost pile, it can get quite warm in the center, and actually you can kill off the mesophiles or discourage the growth of mesophiles and get these thermophiles growing. And so a well-working compost pile, even in Corning, New York, can have thermophiles in it. So thermophiles are relatively common, but they have to stay at these high temperatures to grow well. And then finally, this is a picture from Yellowstone National Park. And if you haven't been there, it's one of the most amazing places you've ever would be able to visit. So I highly recommend it. But this is just one of the um, the hot water features. There's all sorts of different kinds of things at Yellowstone, the geysers and all these hot water pools and all that. But scientists, so Yellowstone is over this giant volcano, which hopefully will never erupt because it will have dramatic effects on the whole planet. But there's all these features where there's water and it's very hot. We're not talking about thermophiles. We're talking about these hyperthermophiles. Some of these are actually boiling, and so. But what scientists have found is there's actually living organisms in there. So when you look at these, they're all different color ones. There's this one with the green and the yellow, but there's all sorts of brown and blues and different kinds of microorganisms that grow in here. And remember, we talked about prokaryotes. We have when I say prokaryotes, I mean bacteria and the archaea. The archaea are these kind of weird prokaryotes, and you're not going to find bacteria here. These are going to all be archaea, the other prokaryotes. So these are organisms that have to grow at these really high temperatures, and these are organisms that were on the planet as the planet was um, creating itself. And because there were times when it was all very hot and organisms had to survive these really hot conditions. So lots of different kinds of organisms can grow in these really hot areas, and they would be called hyperthermophiles. So again, the hyperthermophiles, they have to stay at these extremely hot environments. If you wanted to study these, you would have to be able to keep them at these really high environments. So sometimes they ask the questions, which of these would you find in Corning, New York? Well, we're definitely going to find lots of mesophiles, and we're going to find thermophiles in our compost piles. But unless you were in a really specialized lab, you would never find psychrophiles or hyperthermophiles in Corning, New York. Okay, I think I'm going to stop right there. I'm going to do this topic in a bunch of videos, so this topic kind of ends up going on for a little bit longer. So I think I'll stop right here.